like, and we'll pretty much get started. So I am one of the co-owners of PROergonomics, and we have been fairly successful with a lot of our clients in trying to help lower their injury claims and improve some of their cost savings on their bottom line. And some of the content of today is going to speak about some of those successes. So when we start talking about, oops, sorry, my screen's a little glitchy, it's not moving. There we go. Sorry about that. When we start talking about what are we going to do in 2018 and how are we going to move our ergonomics program forward, some of what we're going to be talking about is going to be legislative. So there's some changes coming forward in January 1 that some of you may know already about, and we spoke about them a little bit last in November's webinar. But definitely we'll want to start moving on that. But the rest of them are really kind of just the tried and true things that the companies that we work with that are being really successful with their ergonomics program, what are they doing? How are they getting traction? How are they not kind of doing the hamster wheel routine? So that's kind of the focus of today's session, is just kind of some good tried and true things that have been working for others, and maybe depending on where you are in your program development, you could start looking at implementing some or all of them into your systems. So we kind of have three kind of umbrellas that we'll be talking about. We'll be talking about how we're going to plan for 2018, how we're going to get ourselves prepared to be, at the end of the day, successful. If there's anything process-wise that we need to review or look at, and then kind of our success story. So that's going to be mostly the focus and saying, well, what are other people doing that are getting them ahead? Where are they kind of coming out of just dealing with claims and actually getting into more of a preventative program that's really showing a return on investment? And what we will be talking about is some of those actual numbers, like what numbers could we expect for a return on investment? Because it's sometimes challenging when we're looking at ergonomic or musculoskeletal type return on investments, because musculoskeletal disorders take a long time to develop. So it's definitely challenging to track. So when we look at what are our goals, I doubt very much our goals for 2018 have changed from our goals from 2017 or 2016 or 2015. They kind of are always there. They're the same. We want to reduce our MSD claims. We want to reduce costs. We want to try to limit or decrease the time spent on, lost time claims that people are off. If we can reduce treatment costs, and then our kind of ultimate goals would be improving the productivity of the employees, change in the productivity expectations from the organization as a whole. So they kind of go at a bit of a hierarchy of where our expectations often lie. So to talk about, well, where are our goals, this is pretty much our only slide, because I think this is pretty common for everyone. We're always looking for that, retroactive reduction first. And then if we can move to a more preventative, more proactive type program, then that's great. But a lot of us are struggling to get those claims reduced or the costs down, or just our lost time durations shortened so that our skilled workers are at work rather than being off. So essentially trying to move out of that reactive kind of dealing with our claims as they come and making, Band-Aid solutions for some of us, maybe more permanent for others, which is great, and more into a proactive. Because when it's proactive, usually you've gone into some kind of culture shift, and there's more than you championing the program. And that is the ultimate place to be when it comes to, well, in any program, but definitely with ergonomics, because it involves so many components of the puzzle. So first, what we're going to talk about is our plan for 2018. So what do we have planned? Well, as of January 1st, 2018, Bill 127 comes into effect. Bill 127 is the compensable claims for chronic and traumatic mental health. So this is going to be an interesting development in what our lost time claims are going to look like, or not just lost time claims, our claims are going to look like, because now we're going to start to see potentially some of these injuries become less physical and more mental. And are we prepared for that? Does our program allow for that kind of change in legislation to not impact us negatively or have us scrambling to kind of make ends meet when it comes to trying to find accommodation, return to work, potentially even arbitrate or mediate your claims, and where are we going to go from here? So as in with physical claims, we're still looking at our foundational piece here. So when we're looking at, well, where do I start in 2018? What's a good starting place? Physical demands assessments has always been a key foundational document that's going to allow your program to, yes, start on the retroactive side of things, but it's going to allow you to build much quicker if you have those kind of documents already prepared. So what we're asking with this Bill 127 is, yes, a lot of us have our physical demands assessments done, but now maybe taking them to more of a job demands assessment. So the job demands assessment not only quantifies the physical aspects of the job, but it also quantifies those cognitive and mental stressors of the job, so that we're able to kind of find a bit of balance that, I may have a very low physical job, but now I may be going off due to chronic mental health, and I may be struggling with some of the mental demands. And what are they? Well, how do I return to work with those? And so you can't really answer that question unless you know what the mental expectations are. And we spent a lot of time talking about that in November's webinar. So if you're interested in going into that in a little bit more depth, if you go back and look up the November webinar on YouTube, that kind of talks in much more detail about that whole CDA component. But while we're at it, we need to then kind of maybe even take a step back and ask us, are our physical demands assessments even working? Before we start adding a whole other component to this document, is what we're currently using working for us? And how do we know that? Well, the first question is are you moving your claims through quickly? Is the conversation with WSIB an easy and fluid one, or is it always arduous and always kind of back and forth with explanations and more data collection and just lost productivity on your part, not necessarily employees, because you're just constantly chasing your tail trying to get information back to WSIB. If that's the case, then my guess is your PDA are not working as well for you. So this is just a quick checklist to kind of give you a bit of an idea of, is your PDA working as well as it could be? What are you doing? The content of this is just generic, but this Pro card we actually have available if you're interested. So it's just a good way to kind of ask yourself, are they up to date? If the last time you looked at your PDAs and it's showing a date of, let's say, 2003, that's not going to instill a ton of confidence when you speak to WSIB in regards to, is this accurate, valid, up-to-date information that I'm actually reading, because no one's even looked at this for, over 10 years. Is the information objective? Are we looking at check marks predominantly throughout, or is there more number-based PDA that you're looking at? If it is a more number-based, then chances are you at least have an opportunity to determine if it's a valid document, because it's easy enough to go out with a scale, a stopwatch, a tape measure, and just verify some of those measurements to say, whoever did this PDA, they said this box was 22 pounds. I have my scale, I put the box on, yes, it's 22 pounds. So the validity really becomes very clear, very easy in the process. It's not kind of, oh, well, I don't know if that number is still true. We can verify that easy. That's challenging to do when we just have a checkbox, because it's usually going to be a range. You don't know the exact number, and you don't know how you're going to be able to accommodate that through if you get a restriction of, let's say, I can't lift more than 20 pounds. Well, we have 22. What could we do with that? If you don't know that 22, you're going to be struggling with that return to work process. And the last piece that we often ask our clients, and again, same thing, specifically when we're looking at the CDAs, is, are they signed off? And this is really a PR component. It's a buy-in. It allows you some peace of mind to know that this is the document that we've created, and it's not just all hanging on my shoulders and I'm the only one saying that it's accurate and true. It will kind of come out and show that at least someone else thinks it's accurate. So we kind of can go through from that point. Okay. There is a delay on my slide changes, and I apologize for that. Okay, so then the question is, if you have your PDAs done, do you have your CDAs done? So we have had legislative changes in the past where first responders were now going to be compensable for PTSD, I'm getting that wrong. Anyways, post-traumatic stress disorder. And so a lot of those healthcare and first responder type organizations have already made this move. They've often already started the process of getting their cognitive demands done so that they have that piece to go back and forth if claims were to happen. So now with this chronic mental health or the traumatic mental health, I feel, as I said last month, that the chronic mental health is going to be, for most industries, the more unknown of the two. If there's a traumatic incident at work and the traumatic health claim goes through, there's a little bit more understanding and clarity and boundaries to that claim, whereas the chronic mental health is going to offer a little bit more ambiguous parameters. So those ones you were definitely kind of looking at. Do we have the documentation? Are we clear before these claims start on what are our expectations as far as the cognitive requirements for each position? So our second one that we have seen, so that's kind of the legislative piece. That's really the big, if you're trying to move your ergonomics program into 2018 and be ready for any changes, I would say that's probably one of the biggest changes we have coming from a legislative and program, keeping it up to date systems kind of perspective. The next ones are going to be these ones that, as I mentioned, they're going to be things that clients that are really succeeding in their ergonomic initiatives and what they've done to kind of help them along the way. The first one we have is just really basic hazard identification. And this shouldn't be a surprise, because this is actually a part of the Occupational Health and Safety Act. We don't, for ergonomic perspectives, have a whole ton that kind of speaks to ergonomic practices or principles specifically, but we do have an obligation to identify hazards in the workplace. And if those hazards should be musculoskeletal in nature, then we have an obligation to identify them and to let the workers know and to train and so on and so forth. So getting those MSD hazards documented and identified. So we have our force, we have our repetition, our awkward posture, static work, vibration, temperature or cold, those are kind of the things that you're out on the floor looking for and trying to see, do we have elements of any of these or in combination? At this point, this is just hazard identification. So this can be a very overwhelming process for a lot of our clients because you just get so much data. The challenge is then trying to take it into more than just the hazard identification. That's step one. You need to start there. But then trying to attach a risk element to it. And I've tried to make this a little bit seasonal. So our company, our sample company right now is Holiday Inc. And what they started with was just creating that laundry list, that overwhelming just pages and pages and lists of MSD hazards, because every job is going to will absolutely have some MSD hazards attached to it. The question is do we need to move and act and eliminate or reduce all of them? And the chances are, no, we don't, because a lot of them may be present, but don't offer any risk for injury to the employee. So what this company did is first they started just gathering that data, and how you do that changes a lot. They obviously we were a big component in this strategy, but you could use your internal staff to help generate those lists, but trying to gather the MSD hazards that you're working with for each job, each and every job. and then trying to figure out some kind of method of attaching that risk element. So they did move and create a risk register so that it would prioritize and eliminate some of that laundry list, so it wasn't so overwhelming and wasn't so costly to try and deal with. And they weren't then going to be putting money down the drain because they just put a control in for a hazard that actually was low risk to start with. So great methods for trying to not just get an overall picture of what your hazards you're looking for, but which ones you actually have to deal with. And at the time that this started, it was started in 2013, and we basically was able to wrap up some of it. This was a long process. We're talking 660 employees, so it wasn't a small organization, but they did look at absolutely every single job. So they ended up having identified 295 MSD risks. And in the 3-year time frame, they started implementing change to reduce those risks, and they reduced 158 of those identified areas. So what that ended up doing for them, if we're talking about goal number one, seems always to be reduce injuries, they did it. They did it just by this. So in 2013, when we started the project, we were looking at kind of a stack of return to work and claims of about 39, and 2011 and 2013. And then in 2013, we were able to pretty much have that. We were down to 19. And that is kind of continuing to slowly float along that area. And this is fairly hazardous work. I mean, if you noticed, it is a nuclear industry. So fairly heavy work. Some of these things we're struggling to engineer out. And that's why I'll mention that this was their foundational movement. This is what kind of got them into a bit more of a proactive stage. And what we're looking at today, so this was the numbers as of, 2016 is where we kind of end. In 2017, they started trying to realize that, these 19, 20 injury claims that we're still juggling and still stuck with, how are we going to get rid of these? So this is where they've actually now implemented design reviews. So whenever they design equipment, we assist them with trying to identify those MSD risks before it's ever exposed to the employees in the first place. And they've been making huge strides in that area to try and make sure that what's coming in is ergonomically sound to begin with, so that we're not getting those injuries, to try and bring down this 19 a little bit further. So trying to make sure that we have our MSD hazard identification happening, and a lot of us, it is. So it's a part where a lot of our clients feel like they're doing well at. The problem or question I often will ask them is then, what are you doing with this information? How are you tracking it? How are you making it kind of a living, breathing document or system or program so that you can see momentum, hopefully in the positive and not the negative, but you can actually see, as we look back here, that we had 295 and we implemented change to 158. That's not numbers a lot of organizations can attest to and say, I have an exact number for what I've done to bring down my injury claims. So it's a great way of providing some structure to your program and to kind of lead you in a very intentional path on what you need to do in order to bring down those claims. So those are our first two. JDAs are going to be more legislative. If you're just starting out in your program or struggling with where your program's at, maybe kind of regroup, go back to basics and look at how are we identifying, how are we documenting, and how are we eliminating some of the hazards, or prioritizing would be a bigger question actually, so that we're not always dealing with endless lists of MSD hazards that are constantly being identified. For one of our clients, they went for more of a process route. So when we're looking at, there's things that we do often to try and help our employees. This example is your office ergonomic assessments. I think a lot of organizations out there, employees will show or report areas of discomfort, and so they will then come to you as, potentially the HR or health and safety component of the organization and say, I need an assessment done. And it may or may not be a directive from a doctor or a chiropractor. It may not even be someone seeking treatment at this time, but they're uncomfortable. And getting that risk assessment or that ergonomic office assessment completed is something that a lot of organizations are doing right now. I don't think that that's a huge add-on to your program. A lot of people are already doing it. But what you'll notice is if you've done a number of these, you should be starting to see a trend in what product is being recommended. Because if you're looking at good, sound equipment with some longevity, that's going to not just be a quality product that's going to last you a few years and not break, but also going to allow you to adapt into multiple, small female, tall male, and everyone's able to work in the workspace comfortably, then your purchasing requirements start going down. The question is are you taking note of what these products are? So what we'll often see is the chair is a great one. The chair is a huge component of the office setup. Looking to make sure that your chair is, fully adjustable. Ideally, it should have some kind of scalability component. Although the standard chair is good for a lot of people in your workplace, you are going to have the percentage of population that's smaller and needs a smaller seat pan or a smaller chair, or a larger component that needs a larger chair, a larger seat pan. So are you using a chair model that offers that in the first place? Because when we go into a lot of organizations, what we will see is a hodgepodge of chairs. It's whether it be because of when they kind of get retired, whether it's because they break or they're just old, or when the last, spending blitz went on, okay, this was in the budget to buy X amount of chairs and we bought this one, but we don't see a consistent chair product in any organization for a lot of people. And that's fine, as long as each of those options are offering those ergonomic qualities, fully adjustable, scalable, good quality, it's going to last. Because if not, then that's when it starts becoming a reoccurring theme with your office ergonomic assessment. So you're always kind of going back to start one and putting out a fairly good chunk of change to buy better product. And if you do that on the onset, and you kind of have people buying good products when they need it, then it can be much less, waste, really, much less waste. When we're looking at how do employees purchase things, if they're being told by their manager or department head that, okay, you said you need a keyboard tray, that's great. Just go online and order one for yourself. Well, I will often get one that they thought looked cool, or it was the cheapest one there, or it was the first one they saw. And depending on your supplier, they may not have a huge range. Maybe, they had all three looking exactly the same and they just picked one of them. So it's not a purchasing method that's great. Just opening a catalog and kind of blindly pointing and picking is not, you can't expect that to give you a great product at the end of the day that's going to be reusable, valuable, and help minimize stress and strain in the workplace. So for instance, you have your keyboards, we like to see them adjustable. Ideally, we rarely will recommend a keyboard tray that's not a single surface, so just one big board that could be mouse left or right. And in order to do that, we usually like to see it at around 27 inches. So if you're looking around your office right now and kind of looking at any keyboard trays you see, does it meet those standards? Is it adjustable, or is it just an in and out drawer? Does it have a single platform, or does it have a secondary mouse component or mouse platform, which often causes a lot of problems? And if so, is it 27 inches? Or are we seeing that the mouse is often on the desktop because it's actually not enough room to actually operate the mouse when it's on this less than 27-inch board? So that's a good one to kind of look at and see. Another one that we like to see trying to put into, and essentially what we're doing is we're building a purchasing standard. That's what the title of the slide is we're taking some of these things that we're continuously seeing in our office ergonomic assessment reports and saying, okay, this has come up now 4 times, I'm buying the same product. Okay, this is the only product from now on that we're going to let people choose. If they need a keyboard tray, this is one that ergonomic specialists are picking. This is the one we're going to want our employees to pick. So you get that. Talking to your IT departments and your purchasing departments on the monitors. The monitors now are getting bigger and bigger, which becomes problematic from a musculoskeletal standpoint because our bodies don't necessarily fit them. But at the end of the day, buying a monitor that is not height adjustable in the pedestal is a very short-sighted decision. You may be saving, dollars, and I'm not talking hundreds of dollars, I'm talking dollars per unit to make that choice. But at the end of the day, in all likelihood, you're constantly going to be having to change the heights of those monitors, which becomes aggravating for your employee, loss of productivity, as well as if they're not changing it, that's when your claim's going to come in, probably for a neck type injury. So again, another thing that we would like to see in a purchasing standard is that height adjustable monitor element is already built in, that we don't have to say, oh, no, we didn't request that in this desk setup, so we just got a stationary monitor that's not going to be able to adjust. And that's when we start seeing pads of paper come in and books and things that at the end of the day take more of a footprint, more desk space, and we've already probably got a bigger monitor. So you can see how this snowballs into just kind of not the best setup. And then looking at some of your accessory pieces that are just going to help individuals fit better into the workstation. Not everyone's going to need a keyboard tray or want a keyboard tray, but they may need, if they're going to work on the desktop, a footrest. And a footrest doesn't need to be high-tech, or it does need to fit to support their legs, but it could be something that you have as an option in the purchasing standard so that you are able to get that appropriate fit and that lower limb support. Document holders, pens, some of these things that, again, are going to allow, yes, more comfort in the workstation, but are really going to start impacting the productivity side of the employee because they're going to reach less, they're going to have to twist less, they're just not turning themselves into pretzels to do their job. We're going to actually streamline their work surface so that they're actually able to work better. So those are some of the things that we really like to see kind of coming up, is when you start doing something, and it's a standard could go out into, if you're a more manufacturing facility or healthcare, but if you are doing these assessments and the same microscope or the same pipette or the same push cart or, pallet lifter, whatever it is, keeps kind of coming up, then those are the products that you should kind of take a little bit of a green flag on and say, okay, I've bookmarked this. In the future, if we are in a position where we're purchasing these, let's come back to these products because someone, hopefully with the credentials that you're looking for, has deemed these, to be a pretty good fit. And a lot of these things, specifically when we're talking, chairs and that type of thing, if you have a relationship with a vendor, often they'll let you trial some so that it's not just picking the one that the ergonomic specialist provided you, but you could actually say, okay, we would like, these are the features we're looking for. We'd like to trial, 2 or 3. And then you could then offer 2 or 3 as an option because it might be short-sighted to say that, this one chair is going to be absolutely fitting for absolutely everyone. So you could at least have 3 options, which is always an appreciative point from the employee's perspective. Okay, so as I said, the bulk of this is kind to just talk about what are the good ergonomic programs looking like. So we talked about, ones that are picking up and deciding to make a purchasing standard so that even when it's not claims or discomfort related, just when people are buying new furniture in the first place, that they're buying quality ergonomic furniture that's not going to have to be replaced and not, more importantly, going to cause discomfort or injury. So that's a great success story I think we've had several of our clients actually work on that quite diligently to get something in place where they're consistently getting just good products that they may not know how to set them up right, but yourselves as health and safety specialists or an ergonomist, if that's the route you're doing and bringing someone in, at least it's not adding to the cost of that assessment because you're paying for the assessment and then you're having to pay for all the furniture. We are actually able usually to get that person set up very well if the right equipment's there. So it doesn't keep compounding the cost. And then we talked about your MSD prevention, starting kind of basic, looking at your MSD hazards, putting some kind of priority or risk conversation to them, and attacking some of the ones that are higher risk so that we're able to make a bigger impact in a quicker amount of time. And when we say quick, you know, as the example we showed 2011 to 2013, we still have a bit of some time to make those headways. So the next one is one that we get very excited about. It is the last one, but we actually have a couple of cases to look at. So there's the 4 elements that we're encouraging that in 2018 that you look at, trying to build one or all 4 into the program that you have. Or if you have them in your program, revisit them and ask yourself that question again, are they working? And that's your participatory ergonomics component. And this has been, it's in the MSD prevention guidelines, it's talked about in the psychological health guideline, the CSA guideline, like it's talked about in a lot of aspects of having this participatory committee that's going to bring just different walks of life, different perspectives, and you're going to have a more holistic program at the end of the day. So do you have a participatory ergonomics program? Do you have an ergo committee or a group of people that are kind of trained and educated and kind of mini specialists on the subject matter that our sole purpose is kind of just bring about change as far as ergonomics goes? So this is out of actually the MSD prevention series. So asking yourself, you know, are we using the operator's experience and knowledge to the best of our ability? When I train, or at any level really, it doesn't matter, I'll tell anybody who'll listen to me, but I would say on average, anywhere from 20 to 30% of our recommendations that go into a report in some way, shape, or form have come, if not even more percentage, higher percentage than that, come directly from the employees themselves. You know, and I once had a professor that told me if there's something holding something up with duct tape, you know, write it down, because someone has done something to improve their workspace. And if it's old and battered duct tape, then no one's torn it down. So it's working for a lot of people. And that's the information we're trying to get. We're trying to get that, you know, the simple solutions that can often be only brought to the table from someone who knows how to do that job so intimately, because they do it day in and day out, and they truly are experts at it. So tapping into that experience and knowledge. We do it in all other walks of our organization. You know, when we have an ergonomics question, we bring in an ergonomist. When we have a marketing question, we go to our marketing department. When we have an IT question, ITs are right there. So, but we're not necessarily tapping in to our frontline staff as well as we could. And so definitely trying to do that. And in saying that, giving them the vocabulary and the knowledge to be able to answer your questions effectively. And this is where the participatory ergonomics part of your program may be falling a little flat. We may have a group of people that we brought together and we're constantly kind of trying to mine those gold ideas out of them. But if they're not understanding what the end goal is, what ergonomics even is, and to this day, I get that question when I tell people I'm an ergonomist, you know, the blank stare comes across because they have no clue what I'm talking about. And if we can educate and train those individuals on some very basic ergonomic principles, then when you ask for a solution to a problem, you're probably going to get a much better answer than what you're getting right now. So if you're finding your participatory program is struggling, it could be that we haven't provided them with either effective training or any training, or we're missing a gap component there, that we're just not having that element coming through. So the MSD prevention guidelines, sorry, that's a little bit blurry, talks about what is an MSD so they can understand what they're trying to prevent in the first place, and then talking about controls and what are the types of things we're looking for, and then putting in some kind of planning strategy to minimize those, which is always our, again, going back to that end goal in that first slide. So how has this worked for people? So we have Rudolph Motors. It is a automotive, and they put together an ergonomics team. They got them trained over an 11-month period. They committed to doing 10 MSD initiatives. Okay, so what they ended up having at the end of 11 months. So although I say, you know, it could be years, it also could be months, which is nice. But so over 11 months, they were able to reduce their lost time days by 52%, and they reduced their injury costs. Oh, I got $2 signs there. Almost $250,000 over 23 months. So when we're looking at how did they do that? So again, we come back to looking at those hazard identifications. So they spent $24,000. $24,000 was a combination of kind of 5 easier, we like to say low-hanging fruit kind of implementations where we saw a quick fix that was going to make a big impact, and we moved on those, which is great. So anti-fatigue matting potentially, changing the angle or orientation or layout of the workstation, which, you know, I mean, those people that have their mouse on their desks right now, putting them on the same surface gets rid of that problem immediately. So some of those layout issues cost nothing, take seconds, and can make a huge, huge impact to the muscle that's originally being affected. And then into some more involved projects. So installing, you know, equipment and really kind of looking at the process on how we can change it. And so one a month, one change a month. Some of them were easy, some of them weren't. But at the end of the day, when we're looking at $250,000 in savings and over 50% reduction in lost time days, that's definitely worth the output of time and money. And it was all done through a participatory ergonomic program. So a combination of your engineers, your maintenance, your supervisors, your employees, your purchasing, you know, all of these people that are going to be able to really give value-added information into the processes that we're going to be touching on to come across with really good, sustainable solutions. Holiday Ink got used twice. I was obviously losing my creative touch. This was a clothing company, and they probably have some of the best statistics when it comes to how well their participatory ergonomics worked. And the reason being is because they got to that ultimate goal. So when we started out, you know, it was all kind of cleaning up a potentially, well, I'm going to say bad just because it's the easiest word to find right now. But when we're dealing with high claims and long lost time days, then, you know, that's not ideal by any stretch of the imagination. So once we've got through all of those kind of Maslow's hierarchy type things, then we start looking at the morale culture change, the increase in productivity, the increase in quality, and this company got there. So this company was able to, through their participatory ergonomics program, which was started in 2009, first thing they did, they started doing their MSD hazard identification. They created, again, a similar register, some kind of way of tracking and monitoring a living, breathing document that was going to keep changing and moving. They then put in their participatory ergonomics committee, had them trained, quite in-depth training actually. They provided them quite a bit of knowledge and quite a bit of, I guess, freedom in what they were able to control. And at the end of the day, they kind of always kept coming back to this mantra of, you know, being cognizant of cost and injury impact. Because what, as ergonomists, consultants, what we will often see is a lot of energy, a lot of effort, maybe not a lot of cost, sometimes a lot of cost, but being put into controls that offer zero return, you know, that offer very, very little as far as reduction to injury. And some of these things take a long time. Some of them may be fast and you may feel like, oh, I can just knock this one out of the park. But you've stopped asking the question, is this going to be impactful? How is it going to be impactful? What am I trying to do by putting this in? And sometimes, as I said, it's something quick and easy. But other times I've seen, you know, a lift assist go in for a lift that wasn't above guidelines to begin with. And the lift assist is so over-engineered that it actually takes more force, like full out use your whole body weight kind of force to get the boom arm swinging and moving to actually use the little lift assist to travel. So not a big issue at the beginning, turned into a massive issue at the end because we just didn't go through the process effectively. And maybe we weren't listening as effectively either, because I'm sure our employees would have said, and our injury stat statistics would have said, this isn't a concern. So using both of those in this process can actually lead you down a very, very clear path. So this company realized a net benefit of almost $300,000, and they were able to make a return on investment of $5.50 for every dollar spent. So when we look at what does that look like? So from the decreases, what kind of benefits did they see as far as the return to work or lost time or claim scenario? They saw 65% decrease in first aid claims, a 50% decrease in modified cases, 23% decrease in absent days, 75% decrease, oddly enough, in a long-term disability, which is really interesting, and a huge decrease in the duration of their long-term disability. And this is something that we're often seeing, is that there's the body's being taxed and stressed at work, but the injury may not happen there. So by improving the work situation, your short-term and long-term disabilities also reap a huge reward and benefit, because those off-site injuries that are happening because that person's back or shoulder has been taxed all day and they just couldn't do the 103rd thing that they did in the day that happened at 6 o'clock at night and caused the injury, those aren't happening either. So it was very interesting to see that the on-site, statistics were dropping quite drastically, but we were also seeing this huge decrease for the long-term disability, which is great because that can be a huge cost to a company. So what does that cost look like? Well, when we're looking at almost $300,000, a big chunk of that came from that lost long-term disability component. So we saw huge money being made there. But what we were able to see, which is exciting, is this whole production increase. Within the first week of some of these changes, they were able to see 135 parts per day increase. That's huge. And when we're often kind of, let's see, what's the best way to say it? It's kind of, people are hesitant to maybe do ergonomics because they think it's going to slow down the process. They think, productivity is going to suffer and that it's going to be more about people taking more time, or it's not necessarily the case. And this company really showed that and highlighted that, if ergonomics is done well, the human capacity to do work could potentially be elevated because there's not the stressors there. So we had definitely loved to see that this company actually did kind of increase on its productivity as well. And you can see the rest of the numbers and where they go. So those are kind of the main areas of what we're looking for. So when you go into 2018, ask yourself, what is your plan? Do you have one? Are you ready for the legislative changes? Are you ready to make a big move in your ergonomics program and where it's sitting right now? Taking it from whatever level it is and elevating it? Or if it's really not working for you, maybe taking it right back to bare bones and kind of looking, okay, let's rethink this. Let's not just maybe you inherited it and it's just kind of what everyone always used to do. 2018 could be that year for you where you decide, okay, no, this is going to be my legacy. This is going to be my stamp on the company. We are going to just tackle these MSD injuries and we're going to be able to build this through just a better program on the whole. So as in a kind of a recap, legislatively, getting ready for Bill 127, looking to see what does our CDA or cognitive demands assessment situation look like? Do we have a document that is clearly identifying the essential duties from a cognitive or mental perspective so that when the claims come through and say, this person has anxiety issues and they cannot be in a supervisory role for more than X number of minutes? Well, that's okay, because as a matter of fact, this role actually only has one employee and they're very independent, and the supervisory aspect is not as demanding and not as in your face and consistent as, let's say, other jobs that you may have. So that's kind of one example. But you need to get those essential duties identified. The next one is going back to foundational, bare basics, MSD hazard identification. If you're doing it, how can you improve it? If you are doing it, how are you documenting it? And if you're doing it, how can you prioritize it, which is the most important? How can you maybe minimize the laundry list and really get a few hazards that are going to be very impactful onto how an employee feels at the end of the day, so that when we're spending our time and money, it's on the things that matter rather than the things that just let's get this off the list. We don't know where it is on the priority scale, but we just need to get it off the list. We then talked about trying to provide some kind of consistency in your purchasing so that your ergonomic elements are tried and true, are going to be continually returning to the workplace rather than having this hodgepodge of equipment, some good, some bad, some ugly, and having to deal retroactively or reactively with the outcomes of those bad and ugly pieces. So trying to be just better at what we're buying, what we're bringing in, what we're exposing the employees to. And then the last one, looking at that participatory ergonomics component, if you are doing it, or even if you're using your Joint Health and Safety Committee to kind of filter through your ergonomic issues, but really making sure that that training is done effectively, that they are understanding what is expected of them for this committee. If we can put together a committee of people, but if we don't clearly outline what the expectation is and then allow them the knowledge and base foundations that are going to allow them to succeed in there, then we can't expect the program to succeed. These are probably, as I said, the top one being more legislative, but the bottom three definitely are the biggest movers on taking your program from a constantly fighting claims to moving through to where, yes, you may still be fighting claims, but they're short. People go off, they come right back. We're able to return to the work, we're able to offer accommodations. It's a smooth process. And then eventually moving out of that to really getting into that proactive, seeing our injury stats go down on a continuing basis, and we're just showing an overall improvement. And that's when we start to see morale change and just mindset and culture, and even the productivity and the quality components really start to come in at that point. Okay, so PROergonomics, we're obviously here to help in any way as our Christmas gift or holiday gift, I guess, to you for 2018. What we are doing to get you started for that 2018 Bill 127 is, if you are looking to do a PDA, we'll do the CDA component of it for free for one of your jobs. So if you're interested in that, please send us an email. The information's right down there on the coupon, info@proergonomics.ca. And there is a bit of a timeline on there, so you can use it up until March. But it might be a good way to kind of look at getting a ball rolling as far as that Bill 127 documentation piece is involved. Okay, so, and lastly, we have a few minutes. So looking at, do we have any questions? So I have a couple here. They're fairly long. Okay. How long after intervention period were they tracked? For instance, in manufacturing, example 11 months, 27K, where 20 and 15 captured of months 12 to 22, or from months 1 to 11. They were captured from the 23 months post. So they put the initiative in, and then they spent the money in the 11 months, and it was the 23 months after that they were tracking to show the reduction in the cost of effective. So at the end of the day, it was still probably a 2-year initiative that they were tracking, but the work was done in the first 11 months. And as I said, they were looking at basically one change a month. So when you're trying to get the business case and support system behind you to make some of these ergonomic initiative movements, 1 a month is not a scary number for a lot of people. Granted, you have to track it to stay on board, but we definitely will see that it becomes a little less daunting when we're talking one a month. So that was one thing that when we're looking at setting these goals for 2018, using that SMART method, being specific in what we're wanting to do, making sure that they're, I'm not even sure, let's see, it's specific, measurable, attainable, I'm losing it on the RT, but you know what I mean, like rather than having just very pie in the sky kind of ideals, being very specific so that when at the end of the 23 months post the project, they were actually able to look at very specific pieces of information to be able to quantify their success and the return on investment, rather than sometimes we kind of make gross kind of all-encompassing goals and measurables, and we actually can't track them well enough to be able to say whether or not it was successful or not, because there's just too many variables involved to even ever know. And so that's another component that, you know, when you're building it in, trying to use those things and ask yourself, how am I going to show a return on investment at the end of the day? Because if you can't do that, then you're not going to be able to show the case studies like I just showed you. So kind of keeping that in mind when we're building this, the expectations of what's going to happen here. Okay, I think that might be the only question. If there's any others, please let us know. Oh, here we go. Jamie, you've asked if these slides will be available. What we generally do is the recording of all of our webinars are posted online. So once they're posted, the recording is posted, you will get a link to the YouTube site that will allow you to reference all of the content at any time. And I think that might be, oh, we got another one there. Sorry, the screen for looking at questions is not ideal. It's very tiny. Okay, so I think that's it for questions. So I finished up a little bit early, so hopefully you can all get back to doing your busy day. I wish you all the happiest of holidays and hope you have a very safe and lovely break over the the last week of December. And again, we are always here. If you have any questions or comments, please just give us a call, send us an email. And if there's any way we can help, we're always here and willing to provide you any verbal information we can to assist you or services that you may be looking for. All right, you have a great day. And again, happy holidays. Bye-bye.